So, are we good?
Yes, we're good.
Okay. I think I prepared some very short, just to recap what happened last night, and also explain what the setup is and why we had it. So mine is short. I have some slides. I may not show all of them, but this whole thing started as we were doing this with Andrea and our staff, and we were also talking. At some point, we decided to, just make it a bit. Elevate the conversation. We exhausted some level of conversation. Said, okay. Also, Benaz and I, we were going to different schools, and we realized, good architecture conversations are like proper, the things that I remember when I came actually to Canada and went to UFT. There was a certain kind of conversations that are not happening either in reviews or or as part of the lecture series, and good reasons for it. But we thought, okay, we're missing this.
What are the good reasons?
No, okay, we can talk about that. But you understand it's not happening enough, and so we thought, okay, we can try to have some of that conversation. And we thought, what would be a good format? Like, what is an easy format that you can engage in an interesting architecture conversation that potentially can get heated, but it starts easy. And we thought, okay, corners. And we can, we're going to ask architects and colleagues to just think about 3 corners. And I'm happy. So today I'm just going to say why corners, and because I'm happy when Robert sent his presentation. When I just cheated and saw the title, so I'm very happy.
Will there be fronts after this?
There would be, yes, there would be bigger. So why corners? And I made 5, thoughts on why corners. One of them is this format that we're thinking is a good way. It's non-personal, personal. So you can ask an architect not from their own project, but just come up with 3 corners. And we don't have 3 corners in our pocket. And in the act of finding corners for our, finding 3 favorite corners at that moment that we are architecturally speaking, like what is the thing that it becomes actually quite personal. So that is interesting. So it's not your own work, but in the act of thinking about other people's work, at some point your interests become, it helps you shape or, kind of carve a territory around your interest, which is interesting. The other one is, I call it one-to-one. It's a corner lot. And there's not just the corner lot, it's the fact that this street doesn't run through. So there's a jog in the thing that I think it brings the traffic over. So there's a few urban conditions that makes this space to be kind of functioning the way it is, which is not immediately about the architecture, but the architecture is also at the end of a row house. So it's a corner lot. It's the end of a row house that has a bit of a jog from the edge, and so there's that one-to-oneness. It's our space, it's corner, and it's it's that. And then we call it one frame 3 scales. This is 3 scales. We think that the beauty of corner is a topic that you can frame it, and in the act of framing, you exclude things. Sometimes you're in the world of tectonic. Sometimes you're in the world of architecture. You're kind of in the typologically thinking of what is the extent. So in that framing, you exclude. And then there's a question of what is the moment that architecture ends and urbanism begin. And this part of the studio that we've been doing with Nader on Toronto, which is about the block morphology, which really is with the configurations of roads and alleyways and laneways and things like that, the servicing. So there is that conversation, and every time you frame, you exclude. But there's also thematic continuity between things. Not only the fact that the structure, like in the Mises corner, would have representation here, but you can argue when you jump in scale, there are certain themes that seem to be acting. There's a swap of roles. For example, the core, in the typological sense, maybe the kind of equivalent of the corner structure. And so there is certain things that actually shift roles. So there is that kind of scalar shift and also thematic continuity, which is between building, architecture, and urbanism, and that threshold is interesting just to begin with. So it's not just corner details, but we asked for 3 scales. And it's both high and low. This is the drawing of the permit of this building. The previous owner, they just really did a kind of a very frontal shot.
I love that.
And I love it because there's an oblique. The 45 is kind of perspective, but it's that's the
Oh,
ground.
it is perspective.
Yes, yeah, it is perspective also. There is something. So really, the corner world doesn't need us. This is we're happy here. And then that's Mises Corner in Detroit. So there's also, you can. It's both high and low, and I love those topics. That it's just you can carve depth to it as much as you can, and also it's a thing now. And if you don't know if it's a thing now, anyways, there is. Why is it coming? There is certain. Right now there's a whole range of projects that use. Sean Canty calls them eyelash super shingles. So you see a kind of a shingling, like giant shingles that meet on the corner, but they never meet. They never fill it. They just leave them open. So I think it's a thing that's happening. So we were, and for that, this is.
When you say it's a thing now,
Meaning that there is sometimes there are kind of I'm resisting it now. So everybody is doing.
There's a tendency.
There's a people that should not be doing it. And I'm what camp. And so it's a thing now. And anyways, we were happy. We had our reasons until Robert appeared on the horizon. And last time we had this conversation, Robert mentioned his whole topic is wide here, but I'm not going to do the presentation side by side. One was an extension of his conversation with Scott, and again, he would explain it, but it's called Entropic Cities, and he makes a case why this kind of sensibilities either belong to a kind of a low-rise thing in the Toronto thing, but also its origin goes back to a kind of organic relationship, part to whole, of the building detail to a building to a urbanism, and things for especially in Toronto. And I love the fact that it's a very Toronto thing, Robert, and it's very relevant. But at the same time, he dived into a very kind of back and forth on WhatsApp with me on Caesar's Corner. So, and my critique was, Robert, you have two hats. You do one hat of urbanism, of making a case. And then you also die. It was a moment that we had a shot of Spadina, the aerial view that we all know about. And I had a thing to say on that point. Andra went and started the fire, and I noticed we were talking too much, and we paused. But that's a beautiful shot.
I don't have that shot in my.
I'll bring it. Nader has it. I asked Nader to have it.
Which?
It's an aerial shot
It's
of
a
one
north-south
Spadina
bird's
crescent.
eye. It's a beautiful. Actually, it's a beautiful.
It's a very beautiful shot. Nader would start.
Looking south.
Looking south, yeah.
It's looking south, but it's not just the building, it's the ensemble.
Right.
So you have the Victorians defining the edge, the Victorian houses, the row houses defining the edge. Then there's the art school, right? There's a circle, pure circle on the corner. So that ensemble seems somewhere between the conversations about entropic that is just so big. And
It's a problem because everything's a corner.
everything is corner. Richard, hold on. No. But what we thought, that's a perfect moment. But then we knew that Andra is gone. So we lost Andra. We stopped it. The good thing is, Nader is here now to talk about that. And that conversation can continue. Okay. And so thank you for coming, Robert, Nader. And that's my piece. You guys.
Mother has that photo. You don't want me to give
Who's
it.
first?
I think you're first. Or
Because you have to set the stage.
yes, you have to set the stage. This was just a recap, then the stage.
Because I'm doing a bit of a recap.
Yes.
Too.
Oh,
Uh,
so that's your
Not-
version
not-
of what happened.
I don't know.
We know.
Oh, you see also my.
No.
No,
Once
if
you
you
go up,
play like so.
Will I still see the stuff at the bottom?
no.
I want to.
Oh.
No,
you're good.
You'll go
You'll
to
see it.
presenter mode.
Trust
I thought that
Mac.
was
Trust
the-
Mac, Robert. It's this company knows.
Let me see.
Go to presenter view and make.
I thought it was.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my
So you can see it on your laptop.
Yeah.
How
Usually.
many architects does it
And
take
Mr.
to operate an
Tehrani, can you
iPad?
sit a little bit this way?
This way?
To the front.
Oh,
Yes, sir.
but then I have to see the screen.
Sit on the corner.
So those
Better.
of you who
Can
know
watch
me
your
a little
facial.
bit know that I'm animated by opposition. So when Nima told me that he wanted to do a thing on corners, I decided that I wanted to do a thing on why corners don't matter. But it does touch on this conversation that I mentioned to those of you who were here last time that I have with Scott Cohen, where Scott, is all wound up about how there are no longer urban pressures that necessitate architectural responses that justify the specificities of architecture. And I said, that's true. And he's all teary-eyed about it. And I was trying to describe to him
Why it didn't matter.
why it didn't matter and what was exciting about the new city. But the strange thing is, I'm going to show you a bunch of things which probably are not very good works of architecture, and say that the ensemble effect within the city of these things is still a very exciting form of new city making, and while at the same time not really animating the kinds of commitments that we as architects have historically been committed to, and actually why we can't not be committed to when we sit down at our desks to draw anything. So even though I will argue why corners don't matter, it doesn't actually mean that when it comes down to it that they don't. So anyway, my recap is I talked a bit about OMA, several OMA projects which were struck me as examples of where Koolhaas's recognition that the constraints on urban form, the things that generated the kind of contextual responsiveness of buildings to context, their reconciliation with context, were things for him either of the past or didn't matter, and that not only that, that a certain form of arbitrary figuration, particularly a kind of crystalline language, became a rhetoric which became explicitly at odds with conformity. And this is, the Casa da Musica in Porto. It replaces a number of buildings that were used for warehousing and repairing trolley cars that were actually a little bit like our buildings on Spadina Circle that were 19th century buildings that conform to the circle. So I guess I don't really, this is all quite familiar stuff, but just to set the stage. And I was very excited about CCTV because it seemed that CCTV was a kind of distillation of that antithetical relationship to the city compared to those of contextual responsiveness and conformity. So that, and clearly the Whitney edition. Last time, just cycle through the recap.
No, it's great.
Last time we talked. I talked a lot about these Kreuzberger blocks by Caesar, because they were, these were traditional 19th century blocks with perimeter buildings, and he had, all the black buildings are his. He had, rather than many of the IBA architects participating in the IBA project of the late 80s, who had repaired the perimeter blocks, he had not done so. He claimed that there was a new social life that was interior to the block, and therefore would retain the, porosity. Sounds like a jargon word, but the porousness of the blocks. But what was interesting is that even when he did have buildings that somehow seemed to participate in traditional morphologies, like the pointed vertex at the top of the block, he did so in a way that was, in this case, it's like a pure right-angled building, and it still leaves visible the scarring or missing proper endpoint of the block. But his antithesis, a little bit like Koolhaas, is really still dependent upon the residues of the historical city and enough legibility of what would have been its intact form in order to be able to experience its violation. And actually, I don't know why I'm including this. This is, is one of the corner buildings I showed last time. It's the Koolhaas building in New York City, which tries to, in a new idiom, to make sense out of, to celebrate the corner, but to do so in a fashion which, to my mind, I guess it doesn't really. It belongs halfway to a recognition of the significance of the corner and halfway to a Koolhaas strategy of simply utilizing a obviously arbitrary modeling of form in order to express the absence of, if I can
This
say
is the corner
motivation.
of what and what?
Like 23rd and Lexington
Yeah.
or something around there.
Right.
Oh,
But it's a rectangular corner.
Oh,
It's-
yeah.
It's not like a Broadway
Yeah.
corner that
No,
actually
no.
would have prescribed a resolution of geometry. It's
No, but-
it's an invented collision.
It's an invented collision, and I mean it's funny because it does actually sort of complete the block, and it has these kind of what do you call it, like permutable dimensions on the side which are not repetitive, but in fact actually changing in each bay. Anyway, so I have a number of examples, all drawn from Toronto. I have some plans of them, but they are meant to just illustrate what strikes me, what simultaneously excites me about current development in Toronto, and also usually is stocked with rather poor architecture. I mean, exciting somehow. It seems to me exciting. These places seem exciting. They're areas that are quite vibrant in terms of urban life, I think. Like this, and this is Mimico. But they are also areas which seem to exemplify a form of urbanity in which all of the traditional demands about corner making and hierarchy, like avenue versus street, are largely missing. I mean, there are many problems that we could get into in terms of service bay size and so forth. But really, what I have, this is a kind of a shorthand presentation just to illustrate a particular phenomena that seems characteristic to me of much of the larger scale new building in Toronto, that also I think illustrates the circumstances within which it becomes hard to feel that the kinds of preoccupations with formal resolution in design, in architectural projects, are able to grab onto urban consequence, which I think, let's say in the past, used to make the small scale concerns feel like they related to larger scale concerns. So I have a lot of these, this rather remarkable sweep at the western end of Mimico. And there is something, how many of you have been to this part of the city? I mean, if you come out here on, Richard, if you come out here on a summer evening or the end of any workday that isn't just bitter winter, it's just packed with people. There are
The waterfront is packed with people.
the waterfront. Well, it's only 2 blocks deep, 2 or 3 blocks deep,
This
right?
is the old Etobicoke Motel Strip.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, it
That's
is.
what it is, and that was a federal park that was put up to
Yeah, I mean it was kind of a romantic strip in the old days. I understand before my time, but
A special annex.
yeah, such annex. But now it's this. Yeah, and it has about there are a bunch of restaurants. The real estate is in the bottom of these towers, so they're not exactly. They're not Forno Cultura. Let me say. They're not that good, but they are they're fun socially, but not food wise. So I have a few things of that sort. A lot of these areas are kind of, in one way or another, isolated, and they don't have the kind of, urban morphological depth that allows you to make sense out of what we think of as the urban and architectural hierarchies, and I'll get to that in a bit. I mean, another example, I'm just showing you some rather obvious examples, it's more like refreshers since you all will know them, but this is North York Center. And these are areas that I've spent a lot of time in for various reasons. Sometimes personal pleasure, sometimes soccer dad activities. And they're filled with people. I mean, that's the thing about Toronto. These areas that seem, from an architectural perspective, fallen territories are very socially active areas in the city. I mean, this has, you know, some interesting and complicated wrinkles that have to do with the preservation of some of the historical real estate that does serve a different kind of retail and restaurant. But so, I mean, it's just in these contexts, it's hard to think about the delicacy
Of a corner.
of corners and whether
There is that one,
wait,
you know, the Gumby one.
this one. Yeah.
There's two of them.
Yeah, there are two Gumbies.
There's two.
It's Gumby and Gumby's friend. So, but this is Square One in Mississauga, and you know, I mean, the other thing is that now what's funny and quite familiar, I think, to all of us is that there is an idea that in these new developments, whether this one, and I'm going to show you one as well, that they have a kind of there's an historical idiom that they're drawing upon, except it's an historical idiom that doesn't actually exist in history, and it has to do with, like, the idiom involves a kind of diversity, but I mean, they're not designed yet, but they're all, it's one building after another, one podium after another at a scale which doesn't exist historically, and it's without a kind of urban morphological depth that means that turning the corner takes you to anything different.
Yeah.
You turn the corner and you're in the same territory, or you're by like a 60-foot wide service bay. So anyway, Square One. You all know this. And then you can see how, I mean, so a lot of the effort and this is where I'll share again with you, you know, Scott and I have had our debates because he is filled with this kind of end of world despair over why none of this matters, how could anybody care whether it's this one or that one. And
it is a good question.
It is a good question, but don't you all like share, I don't know, like some sort of excitement when you see all of the jumbled mess together, like a little bit like looking at the you know, I don't remember if I
Not so much that I could spend several hours on WhatsApp debating it.
Well, that's the difference between us. We debate other things. We debate other things. But there, I mean, like, what's nice about these conversations, I can just tell you like, they're more personal. There's something that I feel that is exciting about these emergent territories in the city with their jumble of these rather, I don't know, you know, are they mediocre, are they good buildings? They're just all side by side. I mean, you know, that's people, that's good, and bad, good. Okay, so this is KPMB, right?
Yeah.
You
yeah,
guys
so
no
it was-
whispering.
it was particularly
This is not the GSD, you guys can't whisper.
Yes.
That's what contemporary contextual response means. It means like carving out rocks over a Victorian. But look at this. You know, here's like a nice modern tower kind of, and then you know it's got these historical carbuncles attached to the bottom because in Toronto we're preserving the past.
But just to be clear, you're not critical of this. You're saying it works on a different.
These are all variations.
You're
of
doing a back end. Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
I don't know. I mean, I depending on who I'm talking to, I
Yes.
either defend them
Yes,
or
yes,
I
yes.
hate them.
Yes, I'm just pointing out that.
Yeah. So, and this is down in the Canary District. The building on the right is Saucier Perrot. This building, is that Saucier Perrot too?
Yes, it is.
Who's the developer? What's his name?
That's Dave West,
Yeah,
Urban Capital.
Urban Capital.
So this in the plan is kind of a cool opportunity, and maybe it's okay. But I'm going to compare it, and I think this building it's exciting. but and here we have a corner turning.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm just showing how
It's like the Weizenhump exhibition here.
What?
Yes, you're.
What?
Is
You
the
know, the
corner
Weizenhump
consequential
exhibition.
or is it just a corner?
This is just a corner, but this is a major street back to downtown, and it turns the corner to the park. So I don't know. It's not like you'll see in a moment. I mean, here's the plan. And by the way, here is that building by Saucier Perrot 1 and 2.
This corner that you were just
No,
pointing
it
to?
was this one.
Yeah,
This
that's all
one.
abandoned.
but then there is
the other
this
one.
this one, and I just like here you have, because everything is so loosely configured. There's so much space around everything, and then also in the end, because the sensibility is such that the idea of creating a kind of tightly configured response to, in this case, a potentially, well, I mean, here I guess you could say like almost like a new urbanist recollection of.
Andrea just made it.
That was that corner you just spoke about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I said
Yeah.
it to Nima.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
But this was actually a result of the Pan Am master plan,
Yeah.
and you could say it's a lot more tightly conceived than anything in Mississauga.
Yes, and yet the buildings are.
And yet,
This is the result of 20 years of planning discussion.
yeah,
It really took the city more than 20 years
Yeah,
to
that's
do
true.
this. And it was always, we're doing streets and blocks.
Yeah.
And then suddenly the blocks got small and the streets got big.
right,
Block
which is what
small,
happens every
streets
time.
big. I mean, really, what I will say, like, if you remember, like, look at the size of all the buildings, look at the chunkiness of it, and look at the number of blocks that surround it. And this is a very unfair comparison, but I did bring up Piazza San Ignacio last time, and it probably will really irritate Stephen, because he probably got this jammed down his throat at Cornell once upon a time. But
It was a steady feeding. It wasn't.
it wasn't a goose.
It was a
A
drip.
goose
It was,
feeding.
no, it was a steady. It was like a steady diet.
But I mean, here you have, I was sort of thinking about this in relationship to this, and I was thinking, I mean, look at this. You have two different buildings, completely different in shape and context, with their scooped out Baroque facades flanking another middle Baroque facade, and they
It's like
create
our Spadina version.
an ensemble.
But this is a super clear comparison, because the big difference, besides centuries, is that one, as Stephen said, the streets were made bigger because of cars and fire engines.
Yeah.
And the other ones didn't have to accommodate that, that rush of traffic. So it's actually the scale of the space between that makes the big difference here, not just the size of the buildings, right?
But I mean, yes, but also there is a question of sensibility on the part of the architects who are not interested in seeking those relationships.
Commonalities.
And just, we all know, by the way, that there is no rush of traffic in Canary Town. I mean,
But there might be.
But it's at the end. It's at the end of the grid. Why? I don't think
Well,
so.
because the fire trucks have to get through. I mean, this is what happens.
You mean
right?
that there are like 20 fires at once?
But the other thing to this is you're always talking about the external corner.
Right.
Yes.
You could talk about the re-entrant corner.
Yes,
Mhm.
that's true.
And I was going through my mind saying, how many buildings can I think of that have a re-entrant corner?
Mm-hmm.
What is a re-entrant corner?
Well,
The inside
internal
corner.
inverted
corner.
The inside
Okay,
corner.
we have some
Internal corner,
examples.
which
I have a
to a
couple
certain
examples.
extent is that.
We would see some
Sure.
examples.
Yeah.
It's a kind
Not
of
by
re-entrant corner.
Yeah, we actually. That's a good point. And actually, with the CISA, with the Bonjour Tristesse, we did talk about the re-entry corner in the Bonjour Tristesse last week. Anyway, I mean, I was just thinking about what were the conditions historically that made corners matter in the relationship to urban pattern, whether, Piazza San Ignacio, that's, it's another age, another time, another city. But I mean, frankly, so is Manhattan. But this is Manhattan. This is London Terrace, and you can see that London Terrace has like the paired towers that cap essentially a row of equally sized, like almost discrete apartment buildings. But they basically duplicate the avenue bookend structure with the neighborhood street structure in the middle at a much bigger scale, and you can see it in the blocks that surround them.
Where is this?
It's 23rd and 9th. It's Chelsea.
Got it.
Still there.
Still there.
Amazing.
Actually,
And the
what's
pool is amazing.
It's amazing.
What's
There's
that?
a public pool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
And actually, what's amazing is that they have fire separation doors between the buildings, but they sometimes can be all open, so you can see down the length
Wow.
of it.
Wow.
It's not a. So this is what historical city, like the historical material that we often refer to looks like. Then now we have Mirvish. I kind of like this, but I mean,
What do you like?
I don't know.
Well, do you notice that you need the more distant view?
I know. I don't.
It's the scenography of this project that's just very clever.
I don't have it. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
but the
Is that
thing
on the
that's
right?
weird is that it refers to, it's like in a modern vernacular that was never built at this scale. I don't think in Toronto or most places. It is jumbled, and it refers to an historical moment. I think that never exactly existed in Toronto. And then I have like that shot just to show. I mean, what is that?
Is
corner?
that trying to do this?
That is the same project.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
So it's
It has a series of towers that have this kind of scenographic effect where they split the skin into two treatments, so they look smaller than they are.
Yeah.
So there's
They
a frame
look
on
like-
one of them, and there's a kind of skin, that kind of more slick skin on the back
They
end.
look
It's a
like
common
small,
trope.
Yeah.
No, we know
It's
it's
a common trope.
It's so particularly well here. Yeah.
but I've always asked, if MVRDV did this,
Yeah.
It would be much worse.
would I say, oh, I really like this? You know, kind of
Would-
like
would you?
Barcode House,
Would- Yeah.
right?
Yes.
But then I look at this and say, do I like this?
Or Richard
I'm
and
not
Robert
sure.
like it.
I like it better than MDRDB.
Oh my god. Okay, that's
Oh,
another
okay.
corner. That's another corner talk you have to sit there.
Now we're getting somewhere.
They don't care about corners. They don't care
They
about
don't.
Just
corners.
trying to
We
be
agree.
provocative.
I actually, Stephen, I kind of like this. I kind of like
That's
it.
why I'm like it.
I mean,
Okay,
as far
sorry, go ahead,
as,
sorry, I know.
as far as these, simulations of some notion of historical diversity goes, somehow it feels better done. But there are, I don't know. I mean, there's that kind of neo-Baroque one by Rossi in Berlin, which is all like, but anyway, we can come back to this. But I just don't think, there's a funny way that we are simulating history, preserving artifacts of history, none of which actually militate toward us to do things which are part of the historical problem solving associated with, I guess, the morphological circumstances that create hierarchies in cities in which corners matter. Anyway, so now I'm beating a dead horse, but I mean, look at the size of those blocks and the fact that they don't really, there's not really any difference between one and another. That's for me
Where
the
is
problem, that there's no, this is Vaughan, Newtown Center of Vaughan.
Yeah.
Those moments which
They've
should
been
have been
growing.
great opportunities for morphological clarity are ignored, handled poorly, completely misunderstood, or the new territories where the hierarchies seem to be wholly absent because actually the scale and patterns are so different.
But to your point, Robert, if you
Yeah.
come back to the Weisbart-Frady scheme, to follow your logic, like the fact that the building doesn't like insist on making a kind of clear corner there is to make your point. Like,
Yeah.
why would it matter?
Yeah, no, that's true. Except that I feel like it's actually, I
They're
guess,
just
like
they're responding to constraints. They had to have the park in the corner, and all
I feel
these
like it
things.
would have
right?
been better if they had just had plum,
Right, but this
plum
site
walls.
is
Yeah,
different.
it's different.
Sorry,
It's
this
It's
site.
different. Thank you.
Yes.
Sorry.
Taylor, John.
This site is different than all of the other ones
Right.
you've shown.
It
has a lot
more
This
going
is
on.
consequential.
Yeah,
actually.
yes.
And there's a second one that's even bigger next to it.
Uh,
But it's not built yet. But it's
no,
like-
you mean
yeah.
the extension to
Yeah,
the
yeah.
east? Yeah. But I guess what I'm trying to do is knit together the fact that even within the historical city, that essentially morphological chaos reigns most of the time, even where the opportunity exists. And in the new territories, the patterns are so fundamentally lacking in the hierarchies that have animated our notions of corners. It's hard to say what the corners are even to be about. I mean, it doesn't mean that, when you sit down at the drawing board and you have to figure out how to work out like a unit or whatever the space may be at the corner, that there isn't a particular kind of problem. That's not really my point, but it is the one like in Caesar's case, or you know, if you go back and you look at the consequences of Haussmann's Boulevard plan for Paris and the way in which lot divisions were made as a consequence to maintain area regularity or unit division within very strange configurations. There was like you, if you were if you were an architect at least, you would think, I understand how these details within my unit are related to this much larger scheme of consequential urban pattern making, but no longer. Anyway, I mean, I showed Manhattan, but I mean, you know, just to remind everyone that whether, even a street like Bloor, which has all the key lots on it, then you turn the corner on the key lots to the streets and you're back in a neighborhood, so that when you turn the corner on a key lot, you are entering a different territory, you're entering a neighborhood, and that makes the corner turning consequential, whereas you turn a corner in Vaughan or Mississauga, you're in the same space, or you turn the corner and you're facing some gigantic service bay. So a little bit more detail. Where the hell am I? I don't know where I took this
I don't know
from.
where that is.
It's New York.
Oh, it's New York. It's
Yeah.
no, this is Upper West Side,
Yeah.
88th Street.
Yeah, that's yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's so, like in a block like this, it's so clear, lower rise, like say, I don't know, 12, 16 stories, row houses, brownstones, like 4 stories, towers. So when you turn a corner on Manhattan, which is just a more extreme version of the hierarchy, which is true here, it's true in LA, it's like almost all North American cities of a certain vintage have this hierarchy, and turning the corner meant that you were crossing a threshold from one world into another.
But does the Pan Am area have that hierarchy that you showed earlier?
Which is, sorry, which
You know,
no,
it
it doesn't. I mean, that's
Is that so? Is that
you're
good or bad?
my point is that it doesn't.
Yeah.
There's no change.
Okay.
There's no change.
But that slide that you just showed, the previous one,
Yeah. Yeah.
this is the result of a historical evolution, because in many ways the earlier rendition of these were also just 4-story high.
Yeah.
But it was a kind of somewhere between policy and social consensus. There emerged an opportunity to bookend them with taller
Yeah.
buildings without hampering or interfering with the row houses.
But it's
which
also
obviously did
infrastructure
happen.
because those roads are wider, the avenues are wider.
They
right?
are
so
wider.
They can absorb a larger
Yeah,
building.
that's right. But I'm saying it didn't. Originally, they were all,
Well, you can see also this is 86, which is one of the two-way crosstowns,
Right.
And you can see that it.
they're always bigger.
So so actually here it's a cross between the tall and the tall, and then you get the valley, which is essentially what we have in Toronto, and actually kind of as you're saying with all of the the neighborhood protections in Toronto, that the interior neighborhoods are largely protected from
Protected,
development, and the avenues are growing.
Yeah.
Although often, problem in Toronto is that some of those avenues have owners that are banking the land, and then development. In some instances, for those of you who know the map well enough, like say Charles Street became a reservoir 1 block off of Bloor for a lot of 30 to 50-story tower development, when actually it should have probably been on Bloor, and they knocked down a lot of very handsome 3-4-story walk-up apartment buildings.
So if we looked in Toronto at the St. Lawrence district,
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't you say that morphological clarity,
Yeah.
which St. Lawrence has, the big buildings, double loaded corner buildings on the east-west streets, the little townhouses on the north-south street, that morphological clarity does not guarantee an architecture that's satisfying.
No, that's a good.
So
that's a good.
you might say that morphology is not
Not enough.
not
Sufficient.
enough. It's not necessarily a determinant of quality.
Right.
And you might say, okay, maybe Mirvish Village is actually better than St. Lawrence.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on. I mean, that's a good point, Stephen. And I don't mean to. I'm not actually. I may be all over the map in terms of where my judgment lies, personally, and even in the way I talk about it, because, I find I like going to Mimico more than going to the St. Lawrence neighborhood. I mean, I don't like the St. Lawrence neighborhood. The architecture's bad. The fact of the matter is that the interior of some of those blocks, those courtyards that have low rise, not like the streets that are low rise, but they have some courtyards which have some really bizarre front back relationships to the surrounding buildings. It seems to me to be a lot of typological and morphological confusion, but there is something more. I don't know, like they're more like Mimico's more lively, and it's as far as mediocrity go, it's a better form of it.
So, but to come back, I want to connect something that Nima said in the beginning to maybe continue on this morphology question, but like going back to like the Weiss-Manfredi building. That building and the kind of crack between the two pieces, which is the big corner in it, right?
Like
they really are of the same sensibility and generation as Cool House and the Casa Musica, right?
Yeah.
So the idea of these big buildings is that there's so much urban mass in them, and there's a whole life inside of them, and really the corner or the crack is supposed to act as that intersection between this kind of loosely configured city and the creation of a kind of life inside the city, right? That's how Casa Musica, the ground is disturbed, and then there's all these series of cracks, and you come from the city into this kind of other city inside, right? And that's the function. And I think what you're talking about, this tendency now with what do we want to call that, the kind of the crack in the corner of the buildings, is also an attempt to kind of make an event out of this transition from the chaotic city into a building you can make which is somehow more ordered and where you control the kind of urbanity, right?
Well, the only thing is that I think that the Weiss-Manfredi, I mean, this is where you get into like the rhetoric of the form of, say, Weiss-Manfredi versus Cool House. I think Cool House's crystalline angularity, it feels
in that building, but he makes buildings that are not unlike this too.
Well, I guess like, I don't know, something like the bookstore in Beijing was like a big open, I mean, it's like a big gap where that, when I think we were talking about it on our WhatsApp about the, what was that one with the big corner opening?
It's the one that Nader, the OMA in Beijing with the chopping of the.
Oh yeah, I'll show an image.
But I think that those are either, weirder, like more violently at odds with expected form on the one hand, or the kind of gap that you're talking about that brings people in is probably more effective, a more real tool for doing so, because a vertical gap and shaft and circulation system isn't going to do it. And so I don't know if Cool House would be willing to, I don't know, whether he would do something that was so exclusively visually rhetorical rather than actually effective as a.
You mean programmatically?
Yeah, programmatically, like it's a social. I don't know. Let me see what else.
There you go.
There's a serious corner right there. Wow.
Richard,
Did you design that?
This is Richard, you may know, it's like Dublin. It's along the Liffey in the New Docklands. And I was out there, and these buildings are all, they're better, a lot of them are better built than Toronto buildings, but they all, and this doesn't even really show, they're all like arbitrarily wacky.
But a very tight block configuration.
Yes, but the blocks, like it's all shallow. It's still just like all big stuff. It is the condition there. Anyway, that's it. That's my discussion. So, on to you.
All right. Let's see what I have for you.
Is Mr. Tehrani
Push
within the
my
frame? Or?
computer button.
Mr. Tehrani should come further in.
Mr. Tehrani, please. Is he
He
good?
is
I have to
He's
move
in? You have to
he's
be
in,
in.
but he's like, if you move slightly, he would be out.
like this.
Yes.
Yeah, that's good.
Oh, sorry, we have beer request.
After
I have to deliver
Robert's
something.
presentation, I need more.
I
He needs more
thirsty.
Who
clarification.
else needs beer? Like, I think maybe,
I want a beer now too.
Okay.
You don't have any normal beer, do you?
We have.
that's normal beer.
It is.
Oh, I have
Yeah.
really humble normal beer.
No, like
Ooh,
yes.
yes.
I have
Okay.
that.
Okay.
That's what,
Yeah.
I have one more
That's
of
what
that humble
Adrian
normal
wants
beer.
this.
That's respect.
right?
Hipsters in the neighborhood, that's not getting very.
Just a good one. I don't know if it's a twist.
Alright,
You don't have any more of that red?
Oh, you take that's yours. Who else is? Mr. Tehrani, you're good. Sorry, you're good. Richard,
Also
how's your
have
jug?
this,
Yeah, but
any
I'm gonna have one of
drinkers?
those afterwards.
What's that?
I can have,
Yeah.
yeah. You can
I'll
pour
open
one
it.
for me. Oh,
Oh, we don't know.
So it's winning.
Thank you.
I'll have a little beer.
Oh, beer.
Okay.
I can provide that. Oh, that's cider.
Oh, that's cider?
Yes,
Oh,
that's cider.
I didn't read
Who
it.
wants cider? I think it's cider.
I didn't know one was
Cider
cider.
house.
Perhaps blue ribbon.
What do you
You
need?
don't know
Yeah.
from
Charger?
No,
purchase.
is this a monitor or a?
Monitor.
Oh, yeah. We have a
The
couple.
Nima's is
We have a couple
iMac.
of these too.
Okay. Who else wants it? We have.
Stephen,
Stephen, how's your beer?
Always
Is,
Your- Steven,
My
you
beer's
want a
good.
beer?
Stephen, do you want beer?
I'll have,
You're
I'll
good?
have
You'll have.
I don't know if we have that
Sorry.
anymore.
You can have this, I don't mind
You know, part of the DNA.
No, go for a
Jutsu?
beer. Bob,
I
that
didn't
suits.
drink,
Okay.
That.
so it's then.
I can swear you so
Sorry.
I'm looking-
Yes, 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 yes.
Yeah.
I'm,
Yes.
Did you see?
I have a really good day.
It's in the other.
I
Sorry.
just
There's
have
nothing
to
here.
buy it for some
You have cider, I don't think you want to have cider.
Bed
I've
already.
been in bed
Really?
to be flat wide.
I bet that it's also nice to go upstairs though.
To the, yeah,
Andra,
to roost.
how's your beer set up?
I feel that way.
You take one.
Anyway,
This has some.
I never really had one that was. Funny to think what one would do. What one would do if one didn't already have the shelf.
Yeah.
You know, but I'm not sure. Yeah.
It's nice to have the shell.
I think it's nice to do that or something.
Although, whole arguments or something to react.
Well, how did you demolish it all, Robert?
Right.
Yes, some of us are wanting to do.
Who?
I don't know who that would be. Did they come back?
Oh, yeah, well, just for a day, but they're really digging in, they tell me, starting Monday.
I'd actually like to see Chipperfield trying
But
to build
I'm like
in the
anxious about
Midwest
the
US.
design of it, you know, so I've been not being, I haven't been being very pushy.
edition there?
Just because I just
Yeah.
haven't had the
Time to-
time to
What is
really
it?
focus.
We're talking about,
I love
who
what
was
I did
shortlisted
upstairs.
for that building that my
That
son
was
did.
not the same.
No,
It was
much
Chipperfield,
easier.
Weiss, Esbury, Molson, and one other. And
Anyway, my kitchen guy.
the committee
got back
just
to me
like,
at the
they just
cabin,
couldn't
so
put their head
I'm
around
like,
Chipperfield.
yeah,
They're like, I don't know, why is this firm?
He will.
Because they did it very minimal.
I mean, he hasn't
Was
started.
it
yet,
an
but
interview?
I'm-
Yeah.
You know, I was like, you know what a bespoke suit looks like?
Okay.
That's a good one.
Ooh,
Oh.
I like that. Thank you for the
Corner.
That's respect. Susan.
Oh, no, I didn't respect you, the two of you.
That was very helpful. Thank you so much.
What is should,
So I'm less versed in the
Put it in
debate,
the fridge.
although I read diagonally your discussion with Scott, and I was instructed to, you know, do justice to the corner,
Thank you.
which is basically an inverted introduction. Why the corner matters, despite the fact that we know it doesn't.
Okay.
But somewhere behind that, we know that there are hard and soft alibis behind these. I mean, we do know that there are structural reasons why a corner will take on different forces than the generic part of the wall, but we also know that none of that will explain the kind of linguistic pleasures that come with the ornamentation of surfaces that produce a whole other discourse, which I will argue are the main alibi of architecture, or any reason to connect urbanism with architecture in the first place, whether historical or present. And which then results in a series of narratives that today are producing that city that you describe, but when you see it in isolation, you may say, well, wait a minute, this is quite interesting, actually. But if you see 10 of these together in Toronto, you all of a sudden maybe lose focus. Right? So I'll try to go fast in this first segment because, it's well-trodden stuff that, Colin Rowe and all of those other ones kind of force-fed us. But, the part of that excitement of the linguistic for me, as a student, came when I made connections between what a temple was meant to do and how, a wooden structure was somehow meant to be materialized or petrified through stone, and how the ornamentation is a register of the structure on the surface, and then the corner being an exception to that rule, which demonstrates the futility of the act of representation in the first place. Because if the triglyphs are meant to represent the spanning, then they clearly wouldn't be going in the front of the temple, because they can't go in two directions at the same time unless they were coffered in some way. So buying into the narrative function of architecture is the first step to understand that it's the only thing that matters, or that it's completely futile in the first place, right? Meanwhile, as I was doing
Nader, you're gonna school me, aren't you?
I'm just giving you a mirror of what you just said, right?
I'm like a spoiled kid.
You can't nod so
I know. So much. Sorry. That was a very.
So, I get all sorts of algorithm feeds because I communicate with Rudolph, so I get a lot of muscle men and all of that. But in between all of my feeds, I got this Barron's image, which is just exciting.
Wow.
And I didn't know this building, and I immediately sent it to Nima. And the reason I like it is that it connects several things all at once. It's what I like to call the catalytic detail. The brick, in the way that it forms a corner, has a direct relationship between that and the structure, the buttressing, which I'll show you how that works in plan, but also, as it turns out, has a direct relationship with the figures of the roof. And so here, surface, figure, and type come into full conversation with each other in a way that most buildings don't, in a way, or they're not forced to do that. And so there's a distinct pleasure that this building gives in its in the reciprocity between part and whole, that even, as much as we like this, at the end we understand that it's in the same way that this is rhetorical, this is just more rhetorical, because we know it's just a skin. But that doesn't, in and of itself, lessen the pleasure that we get of those moments in Santa Maria de la Pace. A lot of you have seen me talk about this before. In my own discoveries of walking around Rome, where you see the orders and the hierarchies stacked up, but in a moment of either absent-mindedness or total perversion, Bramante skips a beat, and then the orders get swallowed up in the corner. and you realize that in this neglect, there is the possibility of architecture. And I don't know, again, if I don't know enough about the history of this. Like any historian I've asked has never given me a satisfying response.
Brunelleschi did the same in Pazzi Chapel and New Sacristy.
Intentionally?
Well, he did it twice.
That's about as much evidence as you need.
Anyway, but then anyway, I'd much prefer for this to be an act of intention
Yeah, I think it's
than
intentional.
neglect, right?
I think it's intentional.
Well, because when you get to Kirikati and by the time you double up the columns and they end up in these kind of lumpen forms of aggregating columns and twinning them and all of that, that's equally. I mean, I see this and that as the same thing, whether that was neglect or not, or let's say that was neglect, oversight, but it produced the possibility of this in some way. Anyway, you get that. So as you go from the building or the detail to the block, you're all familiar with this Kahn house where the kind of the geometry of these two masses are conjoined in this key moment that a lot of our teachers then riff on as they do the Folly, Machado Silvetti I'm talking about. But I was prompted to look at
But this is a fragment of Rome, right? In a way, this is
yeah.
a lot of Kahn's work in this period came after he was
Right.
at the American Academy. And
Right,
it has this
exactly.
kind of memory, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, all of you know that we have this studio at Cooper where we do analysis. We don't do analysis before a studio project. The whole studio project is an analysis. So there's about 2 or 3 dozen buildings, and Kahn's Motherhouse was one of them. And I decided that I'd always, like everybody else, I'd always loved this building. Never built, of course. There's many instantiations of it, but I decided I need to understand it better, and so I need to develop a fiction that will explain it in some way based on the issue of the corner, because what this does is that obviously everything that gets jiggled up in the middle produces conditions of obliqueness and corneredness that are pretty evident. I mean, you look at these kind of calculated obliques and they're embedded in there, and you realize, no, there is something quite systemic, and it's not arbitrary. It's arbitrary, but it's actually calculated, it's composed. And so really it's about the interstices of all of these things, and recognizing that it didn't just come out in one instance. There were many different versions of it, and they are fundamentally different, actually. I mean, the fact that they're jiggling around doesn't produce the same conditions, which is what makes the final version quite exciting. So I imagine that
Nader, is there another slide of it after this or no?
there are many slides in this.
Okay.
Too many almost, sorry. Would you like me to go back?
Many of us
Wait till
we're
you get to
obsessed
the
with
last
this
one.
project.
Yeah,
Well, we
there's
came to this,
There's
by
like
the
20
way.
more of this
Okay.
coming on. I'm
But
sorry that I'm...
This came to us actually by James Sterling, because when he
Yes,
when
very
he built
bad.
the
very bad version.
when he built what was
Very
it,
bad.
the
The Berlin
gallery,
Institute.
we were like, oh, where did this come from? And it's like, oh, this is like the real version.
No, this is really good, and it only gets better, in my mind anyway.
Yeah.
So this is
Wow.
my interpretation of where this began.
Did you draw that?
He
I did-
corrected it.
Montaged it.
I did this.
Oh, very good.
So, and if you're looking for...
Did you do this?
And he got Nima to put little dots on the wall to give it like patina.
I had to relearn Photoshop in order to draw this. So this is all on Photoshop, but it is a legitimate drawing. Anyway, but you know, to understand this, all you need to do is to look at, you know, several dozen cloisters and monasteries and so forth, and to understand the relationship between parts and wholes. In this case, it's parts and wholes of types, not of details or so, and you know, you get to see how they operate in a grid or how they don't when certain types fall off of it. So what I try to do is to sort of identify what are the possible embedded types within the overall or configuration of the building. And so you get a condition like this with the kind of evacuated corners, and of course you've seen, you know, many historical antecedents of, you know, the square chapel with the kind of carved corners. You look at the chapel, and also it's not completely accidental that he's dealing with squares. So he's forcing different types into those pure squares, but as you know, large basilicas go, this also fits into a known type as a basilica that is evacuated of the cross, let's say. The other one is the building that actually is on this geometry ultimately, and I fashion it to what more closely aligns with the Venetian palazzo, which always has that characteristic hall in the center where the boat comes on one side and the pedestrian on the other, and that gives rise to a public hall that then gets you to the stairs and so forth and so on. And then, you know, you get to the kind of quadrupod plan, which, you know, for which there are many plans from, you know, history to the present, where, you know, even some of the colonial houses that have the chimney in the center and you circulate around the four corners with the kind of heat in the center. I put Rodolfo's villa in there because in his case the appeal to the type was a very explicit one. And then finally, I think I appeal to the courtyard, or the U-shaped courtyard, which, you know, obviously has many different generational connections to other U-shaped things that usually open up onto a landscape or some other prospect, and so they're used in different ways. So when you put all of these together, you say, okay, so, you know, how do they deform and all of that, and this is not exactly related to it, but I also imagined, you know, that as you when you're in art history, there's that key moment where they explain to you how you know, the kouros goes from a frontal position to the contrapposta, and how that in a way produces a dynamism that also appeals to a different form of realism. In this case, the plan that he produces is proto-symmetrical, but not exactly. And so you get corners like this that are articulated, but then get larger as one of those corners gets amplified. Importantly, note that if all of these rooms had been the same, there's no reason for the contortion of the corridors. But in fact, the way that he structures the program is that these are shallow, these are deep. So there's a natural disjunction between the two, and that's what effectively results in the reorientation of one oblique right there. So this pushes out, and that sort of hits a kind of division, and a kind of oblique division. So you're looking down the corridor and inside into this hall at the same time. This goes on and on. This orthogonal condition, there's more going on here, but I just simplified by doing it just with that volume, and the relationship of that to how it connects to this volume here. That rotates up to essentially terminate that axis, and by rotating over, it locks into that corner over there. And that produces another deliberate oblique symmetry. This stays put, and it's on the grid of the overall geometry of the building. And then that links, of course, to that on the same geometry of that. So in fact, it is not entirely random. These are all, it's really two competing geometries that are speaking to each other. And then finally, as you look at the way that this is nested into that, it produces another oblique symmetry. I don't really record these ones, but there are other nested ones in here. And then finally, I take you back to some of the other origins, you know, that he's looking at probably when he's in Rome, and you know, the transition from the classical to the Baroque theater, Bibbiena amongst others, that essentially take the proscenium as an excuse to rotate the city beyond that, producing a kind of endless perspective. What Jorge and Rodolfo riff on when they're doing the Folly, that, you know, pits the 1-point perspective against the 2-point perspective. Anyway, there's something interesting about that Kahn project because it's just a building, but in many ways it does what cities often do more accidentally, but it does it in a deliberate way, though contained within its own confines. And we rarely get to do that as urbanists. I mean, it's a very rare condition that we. So this is where I myself continue to be confused because I'm also dealing in the same stew that you're dealing with. But there are those moments which you know, are exciting, about moments in which buildings are cities or cities are buildings, and you know, that's the OMA building that I think you were referring to.
Yeah.
Just and with the kind of chamfered corners, it is a matte building of sizable consequence, but
It's a block in a box.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But its connection to the city is remote, actually.
Right.
It does not. It may be symbolic, but it isn't. There is no thoroughfares. There is no communication as such. But I also doubt that this actually worked in that way either. It had
Bank of London.
the Bank of London. Soane's Bank of London didn't do that either. I'm not sure why this is here, but maybe that's supposed to be somewhere else. But
Remind me what the
this
one
is
in
the
what's
re-entrant
the one in
corner,
the
and
middle? Yeah.
I'm sort of trying to show you that the making of a corner is as much about its evacuation as it is about the articulation of that corner. I think it belonged somewhere else, but you know, as much as I believe that the Bank of London is actually responsive to a context that's not drawn in here, the interest in the making of an interior urbanism is as interesting in one as the other. I think the building that Rem does in Chicago IIT does similar things in equally exciting ways. But you can also see that, you know, as much as Soane is respondent to other things and phenomena around the city, it's a narrative that he's constructing around a very well bound perimeter that you know is actually quite insular. It's ultimately quite insular, but its urbanism, let's say, is more rhetorical and more symbolic than actual. So, and I'm not challenging that as a bad thing. I'm just saying, in the context of Rem, I guess those phenomenal moments that don't connect to the city do visually because of the way that they grab your attention from a scale that is otherwise unreachable. I mean, the anonymity of that in relationship to these strange oculi or reflective surfaces of the landscape and all of that appear quite exciting, even if they don't really have an immediate consequence in the way that those neighborhoods you like to visit may do, because this is not something you will walk by actually. This is you have to be a captive audience of this to be there in the first place, right? And then there's non-architecture here. I bet you've studied this more than I have actually. I think it was in those early years after the GSD you were studying the housing that was right here, right? And
KMW.
oh, right, exactly.
Yeah.
But
Well, we used to do this as a site many times because there was this interesting phenomenon of this kind of mall, like 70s complex competing with the street grid, right? Like there were like two different urbanisms, right?
At the end, what's interesting about this site is that it wasn't a site. The Prudential was a master plan with a building and a geometry of its own, but over time, as it evolved, the mediation of the geometries between the Back Bay and the South End produced lots that were fragments that were eventually totally covered, and then resulted in veritable streets, but also veritable areas where the street was taken up one floor and then connected into a kind of endless mall hotel, which is what's called Copley Place. The fragments of which do appeal to corner conditions, which are obviously, at the end, far less interesting when considered architecturally.
That's the Joan Batty building.
What?
Which one?
Joan Batty, remember? Joan Goody. We used to call her
Joan
Joan
Goody.
Batty.
Joan Goody.
We call her Joan Batty.
So as consequential as the urbanism of this is, whether you like it or not, it's incredibly deliberate in connections it makes in many directions. As bad as it is architecturally.
Can you point to the thing that is a thing? Because in the
This-
previous map, which
yeah.
part are you talking to?
So this is one of those corners
see.
that I identified. This is another corner that I identified, and this is the other corner that I identified.
But what's happening in this part of the city is that there's one grid that has to do with the highway and the kind of earlier settlement city, and the Back Bay is its own, was its own infill, when they filled, had a different grid. So this whole
For those
area,
of you who don't know
this whole
Boston,
area is
the
like a
Back Bay
series-
was water. It was
right,
a
it was
swamp.
water. So
So
this
it's
whole
all
area is like a
artificial.
weird, like a mashup of geometries, and it was a site of a lot of studio studies because of this difficulty of both resolving the competing geometries here, but also the jump in scale between all these sort of post-war contemporary things and the 19th century fabric of the Back Bay, right?
Yeah.
That was that was what many of us kind of. This was a site we all cut our teeth on because it was sort of, and it was all about intersection and corners, right? Like the Berkeley Music Site.
But there is, one is jumping in scale, it's still addressing the edges. It's not like a new urbanist project of tower.
No,
that's
not
no,
really.
no,
So
no,
it's
it's a mix.
This
It's
idea,
not-
this
it's
idea of
very-
addressing
very-
the
very
edges is a
situational.
little far-fetched.
Well, it has it had a
A
lot
lot of the edges are concrete bunkers. It actually, there's
No, it's
moments,
fields. I
there's
mean,
moments you're
address is
walking
not
down
it.
a street and then all of a sudden you're on a highway ramp.
It's all screwed up.
You know,
So it had a lot of plus 15s.
Yeah.
And so to a certain extent it was almost like Minneapolis urbanism.
Exactly.
Next
'Cause you had to
door
jump over the
highway. Exactly.
Next door.
Yeah.
Somewhere between
to Back
Minneapolis
Bay.
and Houston, you get also
You
Boston
have-
right
this
there, right?
Escalator urbanism.
Escalator.
So
Because you
I
had to jump over
had a
stuff.
question though. You described these rather abysmal corners as deliberate, and you didn't want to give Bramante the credit for being deliberate in his insight. Why? I mean, do you think that? I don't know why you
No,
would say that.
I
Is that actually there on the top?
yeah.
That's
Of course it
And
is.
who
yeah.
did that? Was that like
You
a?
think it's Photoshop?
This was done even
Not
later.
as good.
Yeah,
was
this
done
is
even-
that could be like a.
What I'm saying is that the original Prudential Center is back there, which is the Prudential building. Then there's another period in the 80s that this stuff happens.
Yeah.
Then there's another generation in the 90s or 2000s where this other
Exactly,
stuff
yeah.
happens. So it is the result of many episodes, and they are all very deliberate,
Right.
unfortunately so.
Well, right. It's just deliberate and bad result. And Bramante, he meant it and he did a good job. So
No, but I mean, if you look back to the Kahn example
yeah,
and the way in which he did many explorations, but then readjusted them to make occasion out of all of those thresholds, you could imagine great architects here doing stuff like this that are meaningful in their sites. You can't take the flat
but
out.
they're different because these are examples
Objects.
that like they find a virtue in the conditions of a site, and the Dominican Sisters Convent by Kahn is, I mean, you're describing it as an example of something which is generated by its own logics. I mean, it's not. It's first of all, it's a rural site, and it isn't responding to anything. It's all like internal logics of architecture.
Right.
But in the larger picture, Kahn and then all the people who were influenced by him, Charles Moore and Frank Gehry, they were all actually responding against things that this recalls. They were all trying to respond against the megastructure, and some of those things in the Back Bay have aspirations to megastructures, to something that's very systematic and pervasive, right? So the beautiful thing about one of the beautiful, there's many beautiful things about the Sisters Project is this idea it had about this, in a way, an urbanism that can absorb variety and difference
And conflict.
and conflict, right? And so that was a model for how you might actually deal with this chaotic city, right? Where the megastructure required a kind of consistency and discipline, and that was what they were all what he was rejecting, right?
The interesting thing is that the only building that Kahn ever built that was like that had anything to do with the Dominican Sisters Convent, it seems to me, is the house that you showed, the 2-square house.
As far as I know, that's it, right?
Yeah.
Now, there are
No, the
moments
ones
in
in India,
Bangladesh
the ones
where
in India.
No, they're not.
They have
they're,
some of the-
they're not jumbled.
But in Bangladesh, they're not jumbled, but they are rotated, and the oblique
They're
condition.
on the 45. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a kind of
Yeah.
regulated
Yeah.
geometry, whereas those are
Those
odd.
are not. Yeah.
I mean, those collisions, I think that in a way, I feel like, I mean, that must have been a building that a lot of people of our generation were obsessed with, the Dominican Sisters Convent. Maybe, I don't know, other people have been.
Sometimes.
The youths, the youths. But I think that we all looked at that with a kind of confidence about Kahn's, because it's only a plan, and then there were, right?
It's actually a very interesting section, but I only discovered it this last
Really? I
semester.
don't remember
There's a
this.
section. There's some
The
elevations.
section is not an extrusion at all.
Yeah.
It appears like there are very complex sections to
Each
that.
of the buildings has a different logic.
They have a very different logic.
But I don't think, but we still don't, we've never seen what it looks like as a three-dimensional.
I have. I am the only one that has
You
it.
have?
Well, yeah, because we.
Oh, because you made it.
Project it.
No.
Oh no, it's in the
I
archive. I've seen
studied
it. No,
it in
I've
the
seen it too. It's in the
Look,
archive.
it's
Oh,
not
okay.
completely drafted up, but it is well documented enough.
There are elevations of it.
Yeah,
There's not a three-dimensional
Yeah, but we
view
made
of it.
3D models of them.
I'm just
so,
saying,
yeah.
there are plans
Yeah, and there's
elevations
elevations and sections.
and
yes.
sections, but there's no
Yes.
3D view of it.
Correct. That's
Okay.
correct. Yeah.
So we have a lot of confidence in what it might be because, of one project, which is the house.
Right.
Anyway, it's just funny because you look at that and you think, God, how the hell does he make those corners work when those buildings come up?
Yeah, I know.
But I don't know what to say about that. It's just that, apropos of the whole discussion about, I mean, you're making a point about in a sense, you are describing the virtues of autonomous concerns of the architectural project, no?
I am,
Yeah.
until I get to the end.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right, I'll let you go.
I mean, and that helps introduce me to the last point. I mean, I like to think some of the reasons we like all of these in some degree is that their purity, their autonomy, but also that there's some reciprocity between the inside and the outside. In this case, actually, the triangle is a direct result of the geometry of the diagonal that terminates on the water, but it didn't need to be a triangular building. They took advantage of that to make a pure form. They levitate the building so they don't have to deal with the urbanism to produce a zone of shade that then supports a very different urban construct underneath that, with the auditorium and all of that, that in and of itself produces another kind of urbanism. But that idea of making a relationship between the inside and the outside meaningful, this is the Daniel Castor drawings I always show, is something that we like to think of as an architecture of integration, something that is often not in reach when you're dealing with the scale of urbanism that you show. So I just came back from Barcelona and I stumbled into this park by Agence Terre, which is the result of essentially what was a new intersection in town.
This is fairly new.
This is brand new, but the intersection is not. It's,
Yeah, but
it's where the tower, the Nouvelle Tower is, so which that must be about 20, 30 years old, and actually was, the site of a major highway roundabout, which was demolished after 20 years. I mean, so their version of Spadina Circle, containing is turned into this, and yet they have to still take the main boulevard through the diagonal, and so this produces balcony conditions, but the ground is rendered seamless. And most importantly, what I discovered is that the figure of the center is by definition ragged, because it's the residue of all of those blocks, not deliberate corner conditions in the way that Haussmann may have designed them or construed them in morphological terms. Sometimes
Haussmann's were not deliberate. The architects were ingenious in response.
Yeah, but there was a consistency in, Haussmann cuts right through them, but it results in a resolution that is not evident here, because this is like the cut at the raw moment.
Yeah.
And so you see a new building here, but a lot of this is the remains of older morphologies, some of which are, from the earlier part of the century, some of them which are even as late as the 80s or 90s. But this is brand new, this is brand new, this is brand new, and that kind of process of reconsideration of the internal figure is something that's happening right now. Beyond that, there's something interesting that's happening of the landscape architects, and this goes away from our discussion, but I think is equally, if not more, interesting, is that they don't hide from these monumental axes of the diagonal and all of that. They are unapologetic about them, and they create large-scale paseos which are way too large to be inhabited, even though they break up the scale of them in very successful ways. But then they create deliberate rooms in them.
What are those donuts? Are they buildings?
They are many things. This is a children's playground. This is a covered pavilion where there's music. This is a lawn like the Hat Shell in Boston. This is a game room for sports. This is a meditation room with bamboo, and it goes on and on.
You can do circles well.
The curious thing about it is it looks like it's a center, but it's actually an edge. Like if you squint at it, the texture to the left is all intact. And if you look at the right, the texture starts to get really scrappy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it just
it's-
sort of dissipates.
But when you're in there, there's two things that emerge. One is a picturesque series of fragments where you're never allowed to see the whole. You see deliberate relationships, horticultural and visual, to a neighborhood. And then all of a sudden you stumble into a room. I'm showing it from above to demonstrate that, but there are other views where you get to see a large civic figure, and then you realize you're in a public space. Sometimes they're carved because they're going to the subway system, sometimes they're above ground, sometimes they're green, sometimes they're hard, etc. And then that is the excuse to complete the ragged edges, which results in these other moments where these new projects are emerging, and they are also what the corner buildings of the 2020s, where the idea of the corner is reconstituted around what were landscape fragments. Anyway, I end with Nima's slide because of
Yes, thank you.
something that you would like to conclude with.
Do I want to conclude with? No, I wanted to have this slide
He's
anyway.
doing this.
Because there is a moment, I think,
Oh, yeah?
it happened again, that I think when it gets to the corners of urbanism, the relationship between architecture and urbanism, the conversation becomes a bit hard to trace. It's like, both in Robert's case of showing the ensembles and sometimes in your systematic, growth from building corner to a block and then to the city. There's a moment that we don't know if we're talking about the forms that we're talking about, or the corners that we're talking about, is the corners that are created by the street pattern, or we're talking about architecture. And there's a conflation there that we can look back and sometimes we can see a vacant lot on the corner. In the case of Weissman Freddy, the corner lot is empty. So we're looking at an architecture corner, but we're looking at something. So there's a moment that I think things become a bit blended, and it's hard to make a statement either for or against. I thought there is something about the ensemble. So I like the idea of thinking about Toronto as this kind of not quite predictable ensembles, but it's always good for these conversations to some extent develop a intelligible method of reading context, not just pro or like good or bad, but I think there's something interesting going on. And that was the slide that we finished. It was from the north-south. But I think here there's the best moment that we have the Victorian on that top corner because it's
Top
kind
left.
of arraying the top left. And then we have the school, which is an odd way of addressing a kind of a corner with
Like
another
the park
pure.
we just looked at, this kind of,
What's that?
the park we just looked at in Barcelona, that you have this figure which doesn't trot, which
Doesn't
floats,
drop.
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So you have the purity of a pure figure on a place that it could have addressed the edge, and then we have the pure courtyard square, and even the lots. I mean, the whole kind of grafted or nested crescent that is not happening on the crossroad is kind of pushed to the north. So the crescent, this is not happening on College and Savannah. It's just pushed further north. So I think this ensemble is, you can read it, but I want to suggest some of the things that we saw are hard to. I love the Entropic City and I love the idea of Toronto. I can't read it, and I understand. I'm with you on some of those urban qualities, which is really not a formal quality. It's like about being there and experiencing it. And regardless of the corner, I like the Entropic as a description of something that is not quite traceable, but I don't want it to be conflated, or I don't want it to go towards the city as a chaotic thing that is good or bad, and then it's a chaos and we can't do anything about it. I think there are ways, so that's why I think this is a scale that Entropic quality has a way of, if I see this as a good condition, which I think it's good because it doesn't have the kind of historic defining of the edge, the center, there's all kinds of things that don't respond to what you expect in a good way that are offbeat. So the circle and this, but still is in the world that I can make a case, or at least Robert can make a case, and I would not. I would understand it.
Spadina Circle is everything, right? Because it's got.
It's got it all. It's got,
But it's a different kind of having it all.
Like the stepping of CAMH,
Yes.
the conformity of Borden and the Victorians,
Yeah.
the deviation of Sir Laurier,
Sir Laurier.
and then you know.
Yeah, kind of slightly.
You know
not
what?
But what's
too-
wrong? Like
For-
I think I
for the
like that.
most-
It's
I
an
got
ensemble.
that. I got
For
It's
the-
an
so-
ensemble. It's like that's why we were.
For the
you
most
know,
part.
I've been thinking about this a lot because I'm going to do the site on the bottom right quadrant here.
Oh, this one?
KMH
Oh, so
site.
that's the
It's
one.
the option studio.
That's a good one.
And it's
Enjoy.
upcoming, and so I've been looking at the master plans the university had, which are all this kind of green mat that went all across the west side of the campus, and then what the intentions were when they built this, and like that building on the corner there is basically who knows where it came from, because you know the donut and the tower have a
This
Which
yeah
one?
yeah that,
these
those two somehow were not coordinated. They just
Right.
kind of happened in this ad hoc way. And if
This
you,
is a
if you
pretty nice
In a
building.
it is a
university
it is a
kind of
nice
way.
building. So the university thinks that those should all everything should just be torn down.
Well,
and they think it should be torn
Scott
down.
Mayberry thinks.
Well, they think it should be torn down not just because, you know, whatever, the buildings are old, they have weird floor-to-floor heights, but because of something that's been lurking in this whole discussion, which is basically they want to build a 1.5 million square feet there,
Yeah,
and those buildings are in the way.
right.
And so, like, you know, if you think about the sisters' plan, you say, okay, is there a way to translate that plan into buildings of the scale of the Weismer and Frady building? Because that's what universities, cities are. It's all. That's what the Cool House is addressing. It's this jump in scale presents a whole other problem, right? That is like outside the scale of the human body, even of like visual perception.
Yeah.
And so that's why you're kind of saying the corner doesn't matter. I think because of the gargantuanism of the new scale of the city, and you're still trying to find a way to bring that level of craft to the new reality and identifying it in these moments and automated buildings and things. But I think there's a scale problem.
There is, and to
Yes.
do justice to his argument, I think, and his. What's interesting about this image is that, well, we're looking at it from above, but the
Mhm.
reality is that when you're at the street level, everything's happening at a dimension and at a scale where nature actually still matters.
Right.
In your case, it's all so tall and so large that whatever happens in the first 30, 40 feet is negligible with respect to questions of corners, of urbanism. Not that it doesn't matter, it matters, but in a totally different way. So even the examples that I showed, the 10 city of OMA in China, even that in a way is a cop-out in the context of the real problem, which is Toronto and, I don't know, the
I think,
CCTV
I
and all
think,
of
I mean, I did this
Different.
tour of Boston where I went to like Four Corners, like across the Channel, Leashmere,
Yeah.
all those places.
Yeah.
They're kind of like Toronto, right?
Yes, the new ones that are emerging.
The new
they're
ones.
very similar in all these.
They're very
Yeah.
similar, and
Yeah.
so
There's one in Alston happening. There's one in
Yeah.
Somerville that's happened already. There.
By the way, it's just that I think I mentioned this, I may have mentioned this to both of you, but it is interesting to wonder. I was talking to Scott, like, who the hell lives in these places, in these new districts? And, you know, in the Boston case, it's all the new kind of a lot of biotech, tech labor. And I said, because it doesn't feel Boston at all. I think here it does feel kind of Toronto. It's like New Toronto, which is a little different. But I asked, what's his name, Jeff, who's the partner at Machado and Silva.
Burchard.
Jeffrey Burchard. He said he asked on my behalf who these people were.
To who did he ask?
The clients, like the builder.
Because he's doing a project
He's doing
there.
projects like
Yeah.
these. And he said, yeah, because they have like the developers.
They have to have a
They have
form of who's
profiles
the
of
market.
who these people are,
Yeah.
and they don't live in Boston. They
They
weekend.
float from
They
city
go to
city.
Austin. they go to all these other like sub cities as part of their social life, where like they weekend in the other biotech tech sectors.
Yeah, we were in Denver, and Denver has a district like
Denver
this.
has.
Right.
Yeah.
So they're not
Yeah.
like part of the.
I know the one in Somerville
Yeah.
has a lot of medical tourism from the Middle East.
Ah.
Because you'll go there, and they have their own little concocted main street, which has the chain stores, which are
Right.
they're not Newbury Street, but they're also not Kmart.
Right.
So, and then, all of a sudden you see all of these Middle Eastern people, and you say, what the fuck is going on? And then you realize, oh, there's a medical center from Mass General that's right there,
Right.
and that generates a whole bunch of temporary rentals. And when I say temporary, it's not 3
Months,
weeks.
yeah.
There's like
Like
6
a year
months,
or
a
6
year.
Or the residents that are
Right,
related
exactly.
to hospitals.
And then this produces this other kind of rental market and commuter market, and it's on the subway, so it's actually easier to get from there to downtown than possibly from South End to downtown.
Well, for whatever it's worth, I mean, it's very, like you're showing all these like beautiful examples of architecture.
Yeah.
Or it warms my heart. And some of them I didn't know. Like one of the corners, and I think in one of your first slides I didn't know it, but and then I'm like looking at these, like what's going on in contemporary buildings. Like, how do you reconcile the two? And I think something like Dominican Sisters Convent, it's. First of all, between it and like the house, the corner, the two squares, they feel like they're relatively unique, and but Kahn, like his great works were unique and powerful institutions. He had, which choose the one, Salk Institute, the capital of Bangladesh.
They're old-fashioned.
They're all, it's like none of them are making the city that we're making.
But they like Gary did with like Loyola Law School. And
Yeah,
all those,
Loyola is a
all
great
those,
example.
All those projects from the 70s and 80s. They are anticipating this problem of scale, where they're saying, okay, we have to do these projects, institutional projects that are gargantuan in scale, and so
Right.
that instead of making the Berlin Free Library, we're going to break them down into a series of discrete parts that somehow, and this is what makes them kind of historicist or almost nostalgic, they try and recreate that intimacy of the architecture that Nader was showing, or
Right.
that kind of humanist scale, if you will, that is very difficult to achieve.
But-
when you see all these new districts, there's a sameness
But
to,
they don't have
to the,
institutions in them. That's the thing, is they don't have big institutions.
They're just big.
They're just big.
right.
They're just like big
But even when they're
retail and big.
institutions, if they're too big, is that at some point, like, like that zone in Berlin that, like with Sony and with,
Oh,
that
it's Potsdamer Platz.
Potsdamer Platz, that is the same problem, no?
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
Well, at some
Yeah.
point we have to accept the tower podium
Yeah,
situation,
yeah,
and
yeah.
Toronto has that. And you can say, has there ever been a good tower podium? And maybe you say Rockefeller Center is essentially a tower
Or
podium.
Seaver, not Seaver. What's the
Lever House?
Lever House. Yes.
Well,
Lever House, but also Rockefeller Center.
Yeah. Yes.
but isn't the idea that if you get enough big buildings, like if Mississauga builds enough of those weird ass towers, right, and they get the podium right, you're going to get some sort of interesting city just because of the amount of people that density
Well, like
brings.
Toronto.
That's the
Robert,
Toronto idea.
I thought you said
That is a
the bottom 40 feet doesn't matter. I think the
no,
bottom
it doesn't.
It's
matter.
all
It
that
matters
matters. It's all
a
that
lot.
matters.
It
Yeah.
really matters.
I didn't mean, actually, that's a good point, Stephen, and I didn't mean to say it didn't matter, and I didn't focus on it, but it's a whole nother problem, and you know that like a lot of the problems of the bottom 40 feet are not just the fact that there's a kind of economic model, which is that it's kind of,
There's only so many shoppers drugs you can get.
yeah, shoppers, drugs, banks, and farm boys, and then there's the problem of the excessive service demands, which create, like when you turn the corner, you have like those 60, 80, 100-foot bays for service, which means that you can't even turn a corner without running into something that isn't really, that people friendly.
What
Yeah.
would you?
But ironically, one of my suspicions is that the problem with the city that you describe,
Yeah.
ultimately, it may not be typological. That is a reality that we have to deal with. It's,
Yeah.
it's scenographic. There's just way too much architecture. It's
Yeah.
too zealous, actually.
Yeah.
Like everything you showed
It's trying too
put
hard.
me in a state of seizure because
Yeah.
that there is something.
Well, that was
That
like
was the purpose.
like the Scott is in a state of total despair. He says, "Why does it matter? Why does any of this matter? People are like incredibly skillful, and they do this and then they do that, and we have that.
It's just an effective
It doesn't matter.
marketing.
Yeah.
It's marketing.
But they're kind of good.
They're all kind of good, right?
But
too much
maybe but it is the intricacy and quality of that first 40 feet. I don't know, Stephen. What do you think?
I think the 40 feet is really consequential.
You know,
But, you know, in all the things that is actually interesting, in Nader's talk, you actually did show a lot of re-entrant corners.
I did.
You
Yes.
actually
That
did
was-
show a lot of space making ones.
Yeah,
And in Robert's talk, it was all object buildings.
In the
They were all
distance,
like
yeah.
external corners.
aren't most of our buildings kind of like in Toronto?
They are
They're fat
external
and they don't.
corners.
Yeah.
The only thing that we do in Toronto is, well, we'll bend the building. We'll make kind of a crescent to try to make a space, but we'll never make a full, like, internal corner.
Right.
here.
Like there's that new College Park project that's coming up. It's just, all the same,
Yeah,
and it has like actually a pretty big interior.
because I think it's easier to market things with external corners. It's more, like, you can market objects.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
Or we don't have. I mean, sometimes architects don't think about things. And somebody starts doing it, and everybody will be doing it. Because I still think with the podium you can do that. You know, you can do a kind of inverted corner. You know, through
Possibly.
a mid-rise that addresses the edge. I just don't.
Well, how about I've never understood this thing. I always mean to someday ask Leo DeSorsi again from North, who did the urban design for North York Center. North York Center there's no good architecture up there, but it does have. He did manage to keep through some legal mechanism some of the historical retail. That meant that in the mix of Shoppers, Drug Marts, and other chain
And
stores,
giant floor plates.
giant floor
Anchor
plates,
tenants.
there are a lot of like local, like small retail and mostly food businesses, but they're small, and it does change it. I don't know how he did that. Do you know, Stephen? Or?
I have no idea, and it is consequential. This scale of things, like in the podiums in a lot of places, the developers say 40,000 square feet is what they want someone to take, and that is a grocery store or something like that.
Right. Yeah. Farm Boy.
Yeah.
Which doesn't even sell food that most people need. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, the thing about Dominican Sisters Convent is that it may be big, but like the central artifacts are all basically single cell.
Yeah, they're small.
yeah.
It's very small.
It's intimate.
But can you explain why it was so important, this project, for your generation?
Dominican Sisters Convent.
Perhaps.
Well, first of all, you know, there's the Piranesi-like character of it. There's its reinterpretation of all of these vaunted historical types.
Yeah.
And it translated into a kind of, translate into a somewhat modern idiom, right? I think it was really the.
But did you feel as if you can apply this in your time? Like you can,
No, I don't think so.
It was a respite from
Design.
obvious order.
You know what I think?
And that was
It's a riddle.
exciting.
I think it was.
It was what?
I think
It's
it
a
was.
riddle.
I think it was
A
riddle,
riddle
yes,
to
yes.
unravel.
It was a riddle
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it only had a plan. It had a plan section and elevation, And it wasn't like other Kahn projects, maybe, except for the house. And it was hard to figure out how it
The house was a
worked.
clue.
The house was
of
a
that
clue.
video, yeah.
And Kahn's work otherwise felt geometrically rational. I mean, so, you know, beautiful, like things
Sort of an outlier. It's an outlier of his
it's
own
an
work.
outlier of Kahn's work, and because I don't know, I feel like none of us knew what it actually looked like.
But also, it didn't have an image, and it had a slightly organic quality. So that thing that Nader was pointing out towards the end, where you have the kind of stoa piece, and then you have these meeting rooms in the corner, and they had the same configuration, but one of them was larger, and slightly they were similar, but took a different scale. First of all, it was a little bit redolent of this kind of historical architecture that grows over time, right? So it had all these kind of eccentricities that were so subtly handled, right? And it lacked all the. There was all these other people doing like Leon Krier. Their work was so rigid, right? And so
Right.
it lacked any kind of formal nuance. So I think it was just wow. You could really sort of reinterpret these historic things in a way that was very plastic and very original, right?
Adrian,
Yeah.
Would you say it also has more credibility because it was a cousin of Le Corbusier? It was a cousin of La Tourette.
Yeah.
Right.
It was
right.
a cousin of the Chandigarh Congress Hall.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Defined
Of course,
perimeter.
yes.
Defined
Yes.
perimeter with
Yes.
things rattling
Yes.
around inside.
Yeah.
Adrian,
But it's
what do you
because
think
it's
about it?
transcending time and wishes.
Yes. That was also his. That was my problem with that, right?
And I feel Nader presenting it almost as a pleasure of analyzing his precedent,
By the way, Nader, you're
then
no.
how it's situated within this context.
It wasn't situated within any context.
No, I think Adrian's question is.
I was doing what
What,
Laura was
for
saying.
example,
That was a
Robert-
riddle for me,
Yeah.
and
It's a
this was
riddle,
my
yeah.
first time at trying to unpack it to some degree.
But didn't we all think that in a way that one could resolve something through geometry at a certain point, you know,
Mhm.
or that was
That was the key. Yes.
manifesto
Yeah.
of that possibility, even though it might have looked disordered, that it
Mhm.
actually
Yes.
had a
Somehow
Yes,
he
of
had
course.
trust in
Someone
him.
like someone like Mineo would say, well, that's not that. He would say when you were failing at a design.
Who would say?
Mineo would say this,
Oh.
that it was picturesque. That was a bad thing, right?
Right.
It was just. But if it was rigorously resolved in
Rigorously
terms of its geometry and maybe even its structure, then it wasn't picturesque.
Right,
So
exactly.
that, even though that is a very picturesque
But
project,
you
it
know-
wasn't picturesque
you know you
because
were-
of its so-called rigor of geometry, and you would imagine because of the way he built things, ultimately the way it would be built through concrete and other things, it would have a certain rationale.
You know that he did a number of collaborations with Noguchi. You know that?
Kahn did?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He did a children's park with Noguchi.
Oh,
It's beautiful.
And also a
it's
really
clay-
interesting furniture designer.
It's
I
clay,
forget
it's
his
clay,
name.
it's clay modeled, and it has some of, you know how like in Noguchi sculpture there are like the parts of it, because some of his sculptures are assembled from parts and they kind of somehow rest in each other. They lock in, and there was some. I think that he actually had an enriching experience through that collaboration with
With Kahn.
Noguchi.
Oh,
And with
but
Anting.
Kahn got it.
Yeah.
from
Kahn
Anting.
did-
and
Kahn
Ting.
did.
Interesting.
Well, Anting is
Anting.
another matter because Anting is more like the tower
Mm.
and the tetrahedral
Like
structure.
Different
geometry.
paradigm.
Different paradigm.
Yeah.
But I think Noguchi is like about the kind of
Resting
of difference in each other. Anyway, I don't know, Adrian. I'm suddenly kind of curious, since you asked like us as a generation
Yeah.
a question. I'm just curious what you think about the project. Do you have a thought about it?
You mean the sisters?
Yeah, the sisters comment.
I mean, I'm very attached to the project because of all of the things that Nader has shown and all of the things that it proves and how intelligent it is and how just it's such a pleasure to look at it. Just at
Mhm.
the first glance, it's like love at first sight if
Yeah.
you really enjoy looking at plants. But then my question was really and I know how much you dislike this question. It's a generational question.
Mhm.
How do you anchor that precedent into your generation, and why do you look at it beyond that, and how can you apply it within your context as opposed to
There is something about
now
there.
and
There was something about it that, like, you know, for instance, we were mentioning the Berlin project by Sterling, and there were a lot of projects that
Stuttgart. It's the Stuttgart project.
no, it's
No,
No,
Berlin.
it's
Berlin,
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 the one
it's
with-
Berlin.
The one that okay.
Yeah.
It's
No,
not-
there's
it's
the
the-
there's the
It's
Stuttgart.
different.
Yeah.
Figure
It's
out.
different.
Stuttgart is also
It's
very
a-
much.
But
Yeah,
I
it's
like
just-
what Adrian said though. He said, if you really enjoy looking at plans,
Yes.
which had a kind of
No, it's what it is.
dismissive quality. I like to say this. I never saw Kahn until I was in grad school. No one ever mentioned Kahn in undergrad.
Huh.
And it was only when I went on a high school field trip and went to the Unitarian Church that I had ever seen a Kahn building.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in
It's
Philadelphia.
And
I
then
did
but-
my third year in Toulouse,
Mm-hmm.
and in the history of architecture, they study only two architects, Alvarado and Louis Kahn.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah.
That's a
But
good.
I
that's
just-
a
there's-
good-
That's a good
that's a-
juxtaposition.
No, this is just a comment, but I was just going to jump in on Adrian's behalf to say that from what I know about Adrian, he likes looking at plans too.
Yes, yes.
So it's not a in that
Yes,
sense.
that wasn't a generation.
Yeah, that was not a generational slam, but
No.
in this direction.
Yeah, right.
I mean, actually, the ideological debate when we were coming up was actually, you know, in a way between two people who were very close in association with between the Venturi position and the Kahn position, and Kahn was like he was, you know, this kind of idealist who ultimately could only build what he imagined these kind of, you know, stone institutions in a country like Bangladesh that actually needed that kind of monumentality at a time in the United States where people just didn't have a commitment to that degree of permanence and kind of seriousness, and that's why, you know, Venturi was tapped into much more the kind of moment of commercial of actually a stronger tradition in image culture, you know, light architecture, you know, making buildings that perform when you're driving past them quickly, right? It was like slow versus fast,
My
right?
question comes out of an appreciation of the two presentations, but also frustration. Like I feel I listened to a Metallica concert by Robert and then a classical concert by Nader. So
That's weird because I don't like that kind of music.
But then it's kind of I'm so educated by what you have showed us and what I learned from this, and somehow I feel that what Robert is showing is so torturous, but it's kind of watching a Godard movie that you can never understand and you cannot put together, but it's
Captures.
Can I make a bit on that?
Yeah.
Because
what frustrates me, the frustration is that none of you showed something relevant in the North American context. And yes, we ended up on the one spot.
Well, he does. He does.
Oh, I don't know.
You don't think the
Robert-
you don't think the Pan Am Village is relevant in the North American context?
No, not
it's
in the-
relevant, and everything that Robert
No,
was
because
showing
it's
is
not
very
in the-
relevant, and it is. There are things to see and to read there, but I don't know if there are lessons to apply,
yes.
except in some sort of indifference or not even indifference, right?
Adrian, I just wanted to say something. I think that there was something about Kahn. One of the things that was appealing about him was his out of timeness, or I mean, he
His
was
stubbornness.
He was a immigrant to the United States who, in a kind of very old-fashioned way, idealized the ideal notions of America, and when we were students, there was a photocopy that used to circulate called it was something by Michael Dennis about how the United States was a kind of latter-day Roman colony, which justified some of his own attachments to Roman classical architecture. But there was something about Kahn, I think, that was stubbornly. It wasn't old-fashioned really, because it was actually an attachment to a notion of institutional presence and monumentality that had to do with a romantic notion that he had as an American immigrant, and he wanted to make monuments to institutional and public life in the U.S. in a form that he thought was adequate to the romantic idea that he had about the U.S. So for me, part of my affection for him had to do with his own particular brand of romanticism, and it was in a certain way it was otherworldly. And as Richard is saying, I think that, I also loved Venturi, but Venturi was more he wasn't an immigrant, and he loved what America was, and I think Kahn
He wanted to love.
Well,
he wanted to love what America
or
was.
maybe he wanted to love what America was. Maybe
Yeah.
he wanted to, and maybe he did.
Yeah.
A little bit of both. And Kahn loved something that like an idealized notion. And there's something, it's something kind of sweet and touching and moving about both positions.
There's another perspective on your question of the generational perspective. I distinctly remember when I was a sophomore that the way that our TAs would speak about history and precedents was a way to justify what you did. Type was an alibi for what you did, and if you didn't fit into that, it somehow your architecture was lacking. But by the time that our class or your class came through, there was already a resistance, a kind of challenge to that notion of history. The expansion of, let's say, of the repertoire of historical precedents got rechanneled back to the 20th century as a challenge to the irrelevance of all of these historical models.
Yeah, Rodolfo would take people to Houston and look at all the kind of
Exactly.
gross buildings.
Now, one of the things that I, for one, in those early years, looking at Kahn, I actually didn't understand why an American architect of this period would be looking at these things that were so antiquated and so anachronistic. But what mystified me about that project, which aptly was not built, was that it didn't fit neatly into his own work, and it offered a release from using precedents as a crutch, because it was on the edge of something else. So the idea that history could be more projective, more liberating, or more forward-looking, and it was different than Gary, who was actually doing something with that now, which we like to call picturesque.
Well, but this issue you bring up was, I think, already in the air that, was any of this, like we all had the suspicion that it wasn't particularly relevant. I remember thinking it was a little bit laughable. There's I forget who wrote the introduction to, what was Rossi's, book?
Scientific autobiography.
No, the other one.
Architecture of the City.
The Architecture of the City. The Architecture of the City. What?
The woman.
What?
Do not say
That woman.
Diane.
Diane Gerardo.
Diane.
There were two.
Thank
There
you.
may
The
have been
woman,
two.
the woman is offering the other woman.
Okay. No, but she translated the book.
She wrote the intro too, no?
And someone, it might have been her, but I think it was
so.
actually Aldo Rossi wrote in the American introduction that when he came to the United States, he went to Nantucket.
Yes,
right?
he loved
And
Nantucket.
he went to Nantucket and he said, "See, it's just like, it's here. It's just like it is in Italy." And I thought, You gotta be fucking kidding me! I mean, Nantucket, like
I
fishing
bought it.
island with a bunch of rich people, like off the coast of Massachusetts. That's not America, right? So we had an idea that they were all a little bit like the people were, of course, were idealizing the condition in Italy through people like Rossi, and then they came back and were romanticizing this kind of gross, vulgar, the actual place that the United States is. So this is not a new problem. It's just gotten the scale and kind of.
Sorry, what's not a new problem?
This problem that architecture, the rediscovery of history and interest in craft, and that was the serious part of postmodernism, was always already out of sync with the actual problem of building in North America.
I love that formulation, that always already.
Yeah.
It was always already too late.
It was, and then when Rossi started the building, he saw those things. He saw how insufficient it was in a way, even in Berlin, right? So,
well, architecture is part of it is a romantic profession when you have the chance for it.
Yeah, but that's not, that's why certain people are, the cool houses and the Portmans are more.
We have to gradually go
Get some food, eat.
get this done. Yeah, it takes some time.
That was great. Thank you, guys.
Thank you guys. This was lovely. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Mr. Tehrani. Nader June is gone.
Great job.
So very enjoyable.
That was
Thanks so much.